When you think of samurai, this is probably what you think of. And you're not wrong. But what if I was to tell you that this and this is also samurai? Samurai, after all, is a social class and extended to women, not just the men. What makes the women in samurai culture a bit more unique is, unlike in many others, they were expected often to be more than frail, pretty creatures that gave birth to an heir. Actually, a bit more complicated than that. If you're even kind of aware of samurai culture, you've probably read about women being married off to an other clan as a type of political maneuver. Which, even then, this could get far more complex than just marriage for some sort of gain. Sometimes, this was a way to get a spy into the enemy's home even. I'll give you an example. When Oda Nobunaga married Nohime in 1549, he was currently known as the Fool of Owari, and not yet the ruler. Saito Dosen, her father, was known as the Viper of Mido, for his ruthless tactics. Nobuhide, the father of Nobunaga, was Saito Dosen's rival in that area of Japan, so Dosen proposed a truce between them, with a marriage between his daughter and Nobuhide's son sealing the deal. Oda Nobuhide died 2 years later in 1551, leaving his son Nobunaga as daimyo. Now you could see how Saito Dosen could benefit from having his daughter be the wife of his rival. Now this next part is a popular story, and due to a lack of historical record, really can't be proven one way or the other. But the story goes that Nobunaga casually mentioned to his wife one night that he was plotting with two of her father's leading retainers to betray him. Nohime then sent word of this to her father, which caused him to have them executed, thus weakening himself by depriving him of those most loyal to him. If this story is true, it could have been a major contributing factor in Dosen's death, as he was killed in a coup by his own son later on. Maneuvers through marriage, of course, weren't the only thing samurai women could do. If the head of a clan died and the heir was too young to take over, the wife would often take over the role as regent. And even when the heir did come of age, it was often the mother telling the son what to do, and sometimes just passing orders in their name. In fact, the Onin War started in a very similar fashion. When Ashikaga Yoshimasa abdicated his throne, his plan was to just give it to his brother. However, his wife, Hino Tomiko, wasn't about to let that happen. Her argument was that the real shogun could not be her husband's brother. The real shogun was in her womb. She was pregnant. And until that child came of age, she should rule as regent until that time. This caused a massive split, with different clans picking different sides, and eventually they went to war, which caused so much devastation that most of Kyoto was leveled in the fighting. Both of these examples, though, were of women who were part of large clans. So, let's now look at what could be expected of a woman of the samurai class overall. Not surprising, but they were in charge of the household pretty much all the time. They also had final say on what was bought for the house, even over their husbands a lot of times. When said husband was away at war, they had full say over the estate, and if their spouse was injured, it was their duty to either tend to their wounds or find a doctor to do so. Of course, it also wouldn't feel right to associate samurai women with the word samurai if they didn't have some sort of martial prowess, right? Well, they were also quite capable. Well, decent number, at least. From a young age, samurai girls were to practice martial arts. The naginata is often associated with them specifically because of this. And because of the fact that they were capable, they were also expected to fight if their homelands were invaded. For an example of this, check out this ukiyo-e print showing women fighting during the Satsuma Rebellion. Now, if all hope was lost, or if it was required for a different reason, the women were also responsible for killing the children so that they did not become hostages or worse. Interesting side note, the women typically tied their legs together before ending their lives so that they would be in a more dignified pose in death. In case of their husband's death in battle, their daimyo or lord may have also required them to take his place on the battlefield, though this was rare. With all this in mind, you may be asking yourself, what martial arts did they practice? Well, the three major ones were the wakyu, or bow, tanto or dagger, and the previously mentioned naginata, which was basically a glaive. The naginata being their most famous weapon that the Onna Bugiesha or warrior women caste used. Even today, the naginata is strongly associated with the martial women of Japan. Of course, these were not the only weapons used. Spears, swords, and even guns were used by the Onna Bugiesha. In fact, during the late Sengoku Jidai, there was an entire unit of 200 female teppotai led by Ikeda-san. These riflewomen fought at the infamous battles of Yamazaki, Shizugatake, Komake, and Nagote in the Battle of Gifu Castle, which is pretty impressive if you ask me. Speaking of riflewomen, there was one that often goes overlooked that fought in the Boshin War against the Imperialists in the Battle of Aizu. She fought right alongside the rest of the Aizu soldiers, killing several with a Spencer rifle. She even survived both the battle and the entire war. That woman's name was Yamamoto Yaiko. Now, the next question you'd probably be asking is what kind of gear would these women use? Or maybe that's just me being an armor nut. Either way, I'll cover it. Now, for the most part, female samurai armor was the exact same as their male counterparts. If we look at this depiction of Tomoe Gozen, we see the oyore she's wearing is the exact same as any other man's. And I haven't seen any pre-Meiji depictions of samurai women making use of kabuto or helmets. Instead, I see this hachigane being used to protect their heads. Oh, another thing that you see a lot of is hakama being used underneath the armor, and instead of the legs being tied, it was just worn long. Not really sure why though. Perhaps it was to keep some type of feminine qualities, possibly. After all, they are often depicted wearing makeup, though that was admittedly probably just a rare occurrence. I did find a piece of armor that was supposedly worn by a woman in history. This haramaki is said to have belonged to the samurai Ohori Tsuruhime. Tsuruhime being the daughter of the chief priest of the shrine on Omishima, and took defense against the Oichi when her father died. Eventually, she would lead a naval attack against the commander, Ohara, and even engaged him in one-on-one combat and won. So why have these heroines been ignored? For the most part, it's because Japanese history has been filtered through a Western lens. A lens that purposely filtered out things that didn't really fit into what's typically called Western values. And we'll get more into that into the future. Now, if you haven't already, slash that like button. If not for me, then for the brave warrior women of Japan.